Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thanks for being here. In this video, we're going to be talking about this picture here, and we're going to be talking about what goes along with this picture here. So just yesterday, by the time this video drops, there was an announcement that Mythic Heroes are joining Raid Shadow Legends. So we've got a new rarity of heroes. It's called Mythic. They come from these red shards, which are called primal shards, not mythic shards for some reason. We don't know why. But there have been rumors about these red shards for a long time. As far back as February of this year, people were discussing the possibility that Mythic Heroes or Mythic Shards might be coming into the game. And in fact, that is what exactly has happened. But they're not called Mythic Shards, they're called Primal Shards. Now, today I was doing a live stream, and this news dropped mid-stream, and a lot of the viewers were asking me about my impressions, but I didn't have time to stop the stream and watch the news myself, so I now have watched all of the videos, and I'm going to give you my reaction on what I think is going on, whether this is a good or bad thing, what this means for the future of Raid. I think there are a lot of people who are in a little bit of panic mode right now. We're going to talk about whether that panic mode is justified or not. But I think that the scary idea is that there are going to be a lot of people quitting Raid because of this change. And I'm also going to address that and whether or not I think it's a good thing or a bad thing for the game. So this news has come to us via 5 different content creators. At least there are only 5 that I know of. The first one here is Cold Brew. He got a card that had a code on the back, and that allowed him to get to this screen and see Arbase the Stonethorn. So that was his Mythic Champion that he was exclusively revealing. In addition, we had 4 other content creators who exclusively revealed individual champions. Here is Scratch with Garol Bloodmaul. Here we have, oh, that's YST. You can see him right there. YST with Mesomel Luperfang. Here we've got Nub. So Nub Raids has Frolny the Mechanist. And then finally, we have HH himself, Hell Hades with Siegfried the Nephilim. So 5 champions. We don't know if these are the only 5 mythic champions that are being added to the game. Initially, I'm assuming there are going to be more. There are no duplicates in terms of factions. So there's a lot of things that we can speculate based on these, but let's go over what we do know. And the first thing is that these are obviously going to be coming from those primal shards. We don't know how to get those primal shards. We don't know how they'll be available. We don't know how much they'll cost, if you can buy them for money, or if you can get them from in-game activities. We know some things about the champions themselves. If you look at this, what you can see right here behind my shoulder is that each of them has 6 skills. So there are 3 active skills, and then there is a metamorphosis skill, which changes the form of the champion, and then there are 2 passives. So each champion has 2 forms. In the other form, these active skills and the passives both seem to change. So they have 5 skills in one form and 5 skills in another form, plus the skill that actually transform them. Each champion transforms through a different mechanic. Some of them require a turn to transform. Others will do it as sort of a passive effect based on conditions in the fight. But all of them will have a transformation. If we look at this screen here, it says other unique aspects of mythical champions include a higher base stat compared to legendary champions, the metamorph skills that cannot have their cooldowns increased or decreased, skills that gain and ignore resistance bonus when upgraded via mythical tomes, and then they're primarily available via summoning from primal shards. So a few things about this description right here. Higher base stats compared to legendary champions, that makes sense. If you're going to create a new rarity and it's a higher rarity, there has to be sort of an increase in power. So higher base stats make sense. Metamorph skills that cannot have their cooldowns increased or decreased. That's interesting. Having these skills immune or, exempt from cooldown increase and decrease allows the metamorph skill, which is the key component of these mythical champions, to always be available in a predictable way. And then the skills that gain and ignore resistance bonus when upgraded via mythical tomes. I don't know that that means anything other than exactly what it says. So mythical tomes make sense for mythical champions. We have rare tomes for rare champions, legendary tomes for legendary champions. So obviously we're going to get mythical tomes for mythical champions. So I think the mythical tomes just increase the skills or the same. They work the same way as all the other books, basically. I think they're going to work the exact same way, except they may also have this added bonus of an ignore resistance bonus. So for each book that you put into the champion, basically, it's sort of, I mean, ignore resistance is accuracy, right? That's what accuracy is. So I don't know what gain and ignore resistance bonus means. I don't know if that means each individual skill will completely ignore resistance, or whether there'll be like a percentage per book per skill. So for instance, if you wanted the A1 to ignore resistance, you'd have to put a book into A1. But if you put the book into A3, it's the A3 that would get the ignore resistance. Or if just by booking up the champion, all of the skills of the champion get ignore resistance. I don't know. I don't know why they're not calling it accuracy. I guess because they don't want to just have it be a stat bonus. They want it to be something else. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And then finally, this one is big. It says they're primarily available via summoning from primal shards. Primarily available. Now, you could say that about most champions. Most champions are primarily available from shards. But that also implies that there is a secondary way to get these champions. So obviously we can get legendaries in other ways. You can get them from rewards like Arbiter. You can get Lydia. You can get Mithrala. All of those come through different means. Some are login reward champions like Syl of the Drakes. In addition, we can fuse legendary champions during fusion events. Like there's one going on right now for Strategos Islan. So it feels to me like there may be another way to get mythical champions. We don't know how that's going to work. Maybe there'll be like a super fusion event or something like that. That could happen. Right now, with only 5 champions being introduced, my guess is there's going to be a bunch of ways that Plarium is going to try to introduce the additional mythics. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are ways that free-to-play players can, maybe in very difficult ways, get access to 1 or 2 mythical champions per year, let's say. So I don't think it's going to be completely out of the reach of everybody, but definitely this is a reason for whales and krakens to spend more money on the game. And that's clearly one of the things that's going on here. And I think that's where a lot of the fear in the community is coming from. Okay, so now let's go ahead and address that fear. Let's talk about that for a moment. So here we have a whole tier of new champions. It is a tier above the highest tier of champions that's been in the game for 4 years. And so the honest fear, the most obvious fear would be power creep, right? We are creating a tier of champions that is going to reduce the value of all of the champions we currently own. It's going to reduce the relative power of those champions. And then people who don't have mythic champions can't compete. That's basically, the fear, I think. And that is a valid fear. That is a reasonable and valid fear. I think that will, in fact, happen to some extent. I think it's unavoidable. However, that doesn't necessarily mean the game is going to break. That doesn't mean that your roster is going to become worthless. That doesn't necessarily mean that, these champions are going to ruin the game. That's not something that we know to be true. That's the fear. And I think part of that fear comes from the fact that most players of Raid really like the game, but don't really trust the company that produces the game. We generally don't trust Plarium because it seems like every time we think that Plarium is going to do something good for us, something good for the game, they also slip in something that is an attempt to get more money out of us. And again, I am a free-to-play player, but I do believe that it is reasonable for us to pay for our games. I don't think that Plarium owes us anything in that regard. I do think they need to treat us with respect, with transparency, and they should listen to their community of players when they're designing the game and moving forward. But clearly, the profitability of this game is of paramount importance. And despite that, they do put out a very good game. So from the standpoint of the power creep, I don't know that this is going to be worse than anything that we've seen in the last year or so. Legendary champions have been getting stronger and stronger. If you took a champion like a Crizia back 3 years ago and you showed her to players back then, they would have said she was broken. They would have said she's OP, this is crazy power creep, and this is going to ruin the game. Now, when she actually launched earlier this year, she was still very powerful, but nobody was really afraid that she was going to break the game. And I think the same can be said of these champions. The fact that we don't trust Plarium makes us more suspicious of this, but I think one of the things that we want to consider is the fact that Raid has done a good job of introducing new features over the course of the last couple of years and having those be balanced with the rest of the game. When Hydra Boss got introduced, a lot of people were unhappy with it, but they tweaked it, they worked on it, they got it to a place where I think most people are pretty content with that fight. They either do it or they don't. If they hate it, that's fine. But most of the community recognizes that the fight is something that we can actually accomplish. We can defeat the Hydra boss. We can defeat it on all the difficulty levels. It doesn't take ridiculous champions in order to be able to do that. You just have to be smart about it. You have to learn the fight. It's an endgame fight. It's meant to be difficult. And then the rewards are very good. And it gives endgame players another thing to do. That's also true of Hard Doom Tower. That's also true of the new dungeons like Iron Twins and the Sand Devil's Necropolis and the Shogun's Grove and all of those things. So as new features, new fights have been added to the game, the balance of the game hasn't really been disturbed that much. As new champions have been added to the game, the balance of the game hasn't been disturbed that much. So I feel like we're probably okay here in terms of the power creep. It will, in fact, create power creep, yes. But until we see how it's implemented, I don't know that that power creep will ruin the balance. I don't know that it will ruin the game. My thought is it will change the game, but it will give end game players something new to be excited about. And I think that's probably why they did it, because end game players and the whales who are at end game need something to keep them motivated and playing the game and to keep them spending. And just an endless list of new champions is probably not going to do it. So Plarium has created this new tier of champions with new mechanics that can be interesting, create more tactical variations in the game, and get the end game player base excited again about something new for the game. Now, as a free-to-play player, I always want to consider, what is this going to mean for me? By the way, sorry, Cold Brew, you've been over my shoulder the whole time there. But yeah, so let me switch. Let's take a look at Scratch. How about Scratch? We'll put Scratch on the screen for a while. Hey, Scratch, how you doing? All right. So as a free-to-play player, you know, I'm thinking about what this means for me, and I'm not sure that it means anything for me, because I think there are multiple scenarios which could unfold. One is that as a free-to-play player, we will just simply not have access to any Mythic Heroes. We just won't be able to get them. They will be behind a paywall. And that might feel harsh, but it really doesn't change anything about Raid for me. That just means I'm playing the same game I've always been playing. I can't compete with the whales and the krakens in Arena, so I'm not going to try. And I don't compete against them anywhere else, really. I mean, Clan v Clan will, you know, that'll keep me out of like the upper tiers of Clan v Clan, but that's okay. I don't mind. That's not my motivation to go up there and play at the highest level. Now, for those people who are at that level, they might be a little bit irritated that now they have to spend more money to stay at that level. That's certainly possible, but those aren't free-to-play players. Those are spenders, and they can decide whether or not they want to continue to spend. If they're excited for these Mythic Heroes, they can spend. If they decide that Mythic Heroes are an absolutely awful idea and they don't want to spend any money on it, they can bail out of the game. That's certainly possible. My hope is that the spending player base isn't too upset with this game, with this move in the game, so that the game suffers, right? Because if the spending player base revolts, the free-to-play player base can't keep the game alive by itself. But as a free-to-play player, not having access to these champions doesn't really change the game for me. Unless they do something in addition, which is they could start opening mythic levels of dungeons or clan boss. There could be something beyond Ultra Nightmare, right? We could have mythic level clan boss. And now if I can't compete there, if I can't complete that without a mythic hero and I'm not given access to a mythic hero, that would change the game for me. I don't know that that's going to happen, but it might. The second possibility is that I do get access to Mythic Heroes. Maybe I get it through, you know, like we said, maybe super fusion events, or maybe there's a rare way to collect the shards that you need and you have a decent drop rate chance. Maybe, you know, it's the same as a legendary. Like you have to get a mythic shard or a primal shard, but you still get a 0.5% chance of getting a mythic. And then you have a 2 times event every once in a while, and you get a 1% chance of getting a mythic. And if you can get, I don't know, 5 or 6 a month, like, yeah, okay, every year I'm going to get 1 or 2. That would not be awful. That would be similar to Void Legendaries. Okay, I can get 2 Void Legendaries a year as a free-to-play player, maybe 3 if I'm lucky. So if that is what's happening, then it just feels like a step up from Void Legendary. So again, as a free-to-play player, that doesn't really scare me. If I don't have access, it doesn't change my game. If I do have access in those ways and I need it, then I can potentially get it. And it's just another part of free-to-play life. The third scenario is a little bit more disturbing. The third scenario is that as a free-to-play player, you have no access, and there are parts of the game that are only unlocked by Mythic Champions. But I don't foresee that happening. I don't foresee that happening. Raid's never done that before, so for them to do it now would be surprising and out of character. So I think that's unlikely to happen, but it is a possibility, and I think it's the worst case scenario for free-to-play players. As far as the actual champions are concerned, there's something else that I want to address here, which is that we are often in a situation as players where, because we can't control the games that we love, and ideas that we wouldn't have implemented in the game come down the road from the developers, and we didn't have any say in it, and it wasn't part of our feedback or what we were asking for, we think it's bad. We think it's going to ruin the game. But this mechanic of Mythic Heroes is actually fairly common in gacha games. In fact, there's a game called Mythic Heroes, and it's a game I've played. It's a lot like AFK Arena, if you've ever played that game, and it's a very good game. And in this game, they have, I don't know if you can quite see, there's a pretty small picture here, but they have their SSR heroes are their legendary heroes, and then they have UR heroes, ultra rare heroes, which are like their mythic level heroes. And these heroes actually have 2 affinities, just like it seems like maybe these mythic heroes in Raid Shadow Legends will have 2 factions or 2 forms or 2 affinities. Maybe each form will have a different affinity. So it's not that uncommon for gacha games to do something like this, and even to have a tier of champion above legendary champions that are even more rare. In Mythic Heroes, there are only something like 10 of these in the game, maybe 12 right now, whereas there are 70 or 80 or 100 of the legendary heroes. And it balances fine. It actually makes them very interesting. You want to grab these champions, but you can't really build them that fast without spending. So if you're a free-to-play player, you can build one, like get one and max one out maybe every 4 to 6 months. But it's worth it if you do that. And so if they kind of balance, if Raid kind of balances the same way Mythic Hero does with its UR heroes, I actually think it's going to be totally fine for gameplay, and it's not necessarily going to be game breaking. But we will have to see what those stat increases look like, what those extra skills look like, what the extra form means in terms of the tactical choices in the game. But I do want to just caution everybody from like freaking out totally. This is actually not that uncommon. A lot of other games have similar mechanics and they can work. Okay, so that's it. That's my reaction. I do think there is a reasonable and valid cause for concern, but I don't want to go overboard with it, even as a free-to-play player or as a spender. If you're a spender out there, I don't think there's cause for panic. I think there's cause for concern. Let's watch. Let's wait. Let's reserve judgment. Let's hope they do a good job balancing this and implementing this. And let's find out more information. This was the first day we got information. Let's wait until we get a lot of more information before we start bailing out of this game in mass numbers. I would like to see Raid continue to be successful, not only because I'm a new content creator and I would like to keep doing this, but also because I've enjoyed Raid for several years. It's a really fun game. I think it's a well-designed game in a lot of ways, and it keeps me coming back. So I hope that this new feature will just enhance that rather than detract from it. And we won't know until we get a lot more information. Okay, that is it for me. Please let me know in the comments below what you think about this news. Are you excited for it? Are you really worried for it? Are you planning on leaving the game? Or are you going to wait and see? Also, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you can get updates when I drop new videos. That is it for me right now. I have been Colred. Thanks so much for hanging out. I will see you in another video very soon.